Hey everyone, Brad Souza here, CTO of AVI Systems. And I get it. We talk about return to the office like a lot. And quite honestly, we should. It's one of the biggest challenges we face. And the organizations that we serve, well, they're asking us to help them solve this big issue. Now, I think it takes more than just the worker to create a successful return to the office strategy. I even think it takes more than just amazing tech, if you can believe I actually said that out loud. What if I told you that this problem that we're solving isn't just about the office? What if it's about how smart the city is, how connected the city that my office is in, and how that connectivity can profoundly impact the success or failure of our return to the office plan? Well, today on Eyes on Impact, we have joining with us Dr. Jonathan Reichental, who has insights to this conversation that will absolutely blow your mind. Jonathan's a world leader and author and speaker on the topic of smart cities. He's a professor at the University of San Francisco, the CEO of Human Future, a business that helps focus on innovation and tech and focus on smart cities. The conversation that we had with Jonathan earlier today, quite honestly, caught me by surprise. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. But before I do, I want to share our thanks with Logitech, a UC and tech partner that has helped us deliver on return to the office strategies that have made a huge impact for our customers. So thanks, Logi, for partnering with us and for sponsoring Eyes on Impact today. So get ready for an unexpected conversation about smart cities, innovation, leadership, and human impact. It's going to be amazing. So let's get after it. Well, I am excited today. We have Dr. Jonathan Reichental, who's going to be joining us, CEO of Human Future, professor, author, sought-after speaker. You're a superhuman in a lot of these topics. Jonathan, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited about having you with
Well,
us.
thanks, Brad. I look forward to the conversation with you today.
How about we start by giving people a peek to who you are and the different maybe facets of your world. You're a CEO, you're a professor, I think at University of San
Yep,
Francisco, is
that's
that
right.
right? And author and all of this. How does this come together? What's the connective tissue between all of
Yeah,
that?
it does look like a little random, but there is a thread that holds it all together. I have to say, I'll try to share
Sure.
that with you. I mean, fundamentally, I'm a technology person. That's where my passion lies.
Yeah.
At the age of about 10 or 11 years old, I was writing software, and I actually sold my first piece of software to a gaming company. Didn't make a lot of money. I think it was like the equivalent of about $200 at the time, but it felt like a lot of
Okay.
money for a 11-year-old. So I was hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hooked on tech, and so that's been something that has continued to be a deep passion of mine. I grew up in Europe, but emigrated to the US. So I'm an immigrant here, and it's been good. I have, to the extent I could, I have tried to fulfill the American dream and try to fulfill my potential. I think which is what that's all about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
started off in Florida, working for a big
Wow.
professional services firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Uh, but
Oh
everyone was
yeah.
like, I was actually running a technology innovation for them, and we had a lot of fun. And I built a small team, and I worked for some great clients, and also delivered a lot of interesting insights and technologies internally. But everybody kept saying to me, you ought to go to Silicon Valley. Like that's where you'll be best utilized, and you'll integrate with a network there. And um, so finally, I found a way out here, and I came to work for Tim O'Reilly up at O'Reilly Media. And then,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was neat. Just north of the city of San Francisco, in the within the apple orchards of Santa Rosa. And then a headhunter called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in being working in a city, working for an interesting city, doing sort of innovation and technology?" And I think my first question was, "What city?" Because that was going to be a big determinant for me. So it was the city of Palo Alto, birthplace of Silicon Valley. So it seemed like an interesting
Yeah.
place. Met the city manager, who turned out to be a really great guy, and somebody that I knew I would enjoy working for and with. And for the next 7 years, we and we're going to talk about this, I think, today. We
Yeah, yeah.
explored the possibility of how can you deliver not just government but city services in a completely new way in a world of awash in technology and data. And then just a few years ago, I did everything I wanted to do there, but and what I was doing was I got a lot of recognition. Myself and my team and the city staff, what we were doing was interesting to other cities, of course. And I was invited all over the world to speak about our successes and our challenges. And finally, I decided, I want to do this full time. I want to like, uh, I want to deliver insights and work with cities and communities all over the world, not just one community, although I did love that work. So I started a company around that, as you said, Human Future, and so that's my core. But the connective tissue. So what is it? It is education. It is education. When I think
Yeah.
about whether I was leading teams, building my own business, working with clients, or obviously being a university professor or a writer. I also have written many books. um, it's education which strings it all together. I love to teach and I love to learn, which happens when you're teaching. Love working with clients and love working with students of all types. And so that's my journey now. I have my own business. I have a lot of freedom to pursue lots of different interests, but the core is education, and the topic is sort of tech in the broadest sense of its meaning.
Yeah, so you and I have, I think, a lot of things, a lot of passions in
Mhm.
common. I love to teach.
Oh,
I'm I'm absolutely curious about everything. I'm a technology innovator. Here's another thing that I think we might have in common. First of all, you have a contagious passion about you, and I love that.
thank you.
And, one of the passions is really around, I'm gonna quote this, "Leveraging technology for human
Mm,
progress." Our language around that is human impact. It's not what does the technology do or what's the foundational elements of tech. It's how do people consume it and how does it change their life? I mean, that's our
yeah.
passion. What inspired you to kind of focus on that?
Yeah, so that resonates a lot with me. I would just add to the way you described it as saying, I want technology to be a positive force in the world, and that's what I
No.
focus on.
Yeah.
Um, every technology has the capacity for bad things, and bad people will do bad things with it. But my orientation is, to what degree can technology help to deliver a better human experience to the most amount of people in the world. So children can grow up into a world that is abundant and healthy and sustainable, and that's good for the planet too. I've always been interested in this topic. I've always sort of used tech and delivered tech with that mindset, but it got reinforced when I worked for a city. The fascinating
Mm.
thing, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Look, I've told this, anyone who knows my podcast or seen me, they know I tell this story every time, but it's worth saying because it really is very much defining of who I am and what I do, which is when I went to work for the city, my intent was to work with my team to deliver a better experience and to change the city in a very positive way. And I think we did that. I can later on perhaps provide some examples.
Sure.
But that was not the takeaway. That was not the big thing that happened. The big thing that happened was this experience changed me, and that's what I walked away with. What was this idea that um, I didn't realize the role of cities in the world, it being the central context for the future, the central context for humanity in the 21st and 22nd century, all things being equal. So as I sort of got deeper and deeper, I thought, hey, I'm going to be a technology guy in a city. I'm going to, do your typical CIO stuff, run a data center. We'll have databases and email and, wireless, and everyone will get laptops and smartphones, all the stuff you do as a technology leader, basic stuff.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but so that is a big part of it. So that, maybe I would say 40% of the work is that. What I really uncovered as I kind of got deep into the weeds was the world of cities, the other 60%. that the the most successful human machine in history is the city, if you think about it through that lens. And if you're going to, for example, provide a healthier life, a more sustainable world, more education, more opportunity, it's really in an urban context. And then you can ask the question, well, what instrumentation do we have to sort of affect that? Well, process and attitude, they're things you can to some degree bring to the table and control. But the big instrumentation is digitalization, is what can we do in terms of tech.
Yeah.
We're going to spread opportunity and economic progress, hopefully in a sustainable way through the levers of tech, and it's proving itself as I work with cities from locally here in the Bay Area, just south of San Francisco, right through to Eastern Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and South America and elsewhere. So that has sort of amplified my interest and my passion because I want to make the biggest impact. I mean, that's when I think about
Yeah.
even the name of my business, like Human Future, how can I work with others, with partners and teams to have the biggest impact? I'm going to be a little bit sort of selfish and say through cities, and that's where my passion comes from.
So let's unpack a little bit of that. Let's talk about some smart cities. I've been involved in a number of smart community initiatives. Some of them, way back in the day where I helped architect the first um, integrated network for education, healthcare, and public services in the state of
Wow,
California.
cool stuff.
So that was a really cool experience. I've done a lot of design and architecture around intelligent transportation and all these other kinds of things.
Nice.
Today, for us, the definition of community is less about a municipality and it's more about a
Mm.
workplace. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Um, the changes in how people work has really impacted the economy of the urban environment. It seems, right? Businesses, when people are not gathering in the city to go there to work, businesses struggle and all of that kind of thing. Is this all part of the perspective that you have around the work you're doing in smart
It
cities?
really is. It's such a great point and question you're asking. There's few things that don't fall into the urban context. There really is. It's
Yeah.
all encompassing. I mean, look, let's just think about some of the stats here. We are an urban world. We're like almost 60% of all humans living today on a planet of 8 billion
Yeah,
people. We live in cities. So, there's still people outside. There's still rural communities, which of course are very important. Um, but
of
we're
course.
accelerating. We got about 3 million people moving into cities every single week. Our cities are
Mm,
natively growing as well. And so we think by the middle of this, the century, we'll be up at 70%. And as we head towards the end of the 21st century, closing in on 80%. So we, whatever it is that humans do, go to school, go to work, play, whatever, get their healthcare needs addressed, create meaning in their lives.
yeah,
Just practically, it's going to happen in a city. So city intersects with everything, and including sort of the future of work and what it means to have community. Now, I'm not painting some big rosy picture this second. I'm kind of more
right.
articulating the situation. What we do have are enormous challenges, phenomenal challenges that in many ways, if we don't address them, the trajectory is in completely wrong direction. We can't keep adding millions and millions of new cars to roads that we don't that can't be expanded, or it's actually a law of diminishing returns. You're trying to add more cars, you're expanding the roads, whatever, but it's really going in the negative situation. You got to reinvent, you got to rethink, you got to innovate intensely how we address things like transportation, right? So I hope I kind of got to the heart of part of your question. But
Yeah,
if we want to talk about just the future of work, it is an urban question largely.
yeah, it's interesting to me. So, I mean, I'm gonna I'll use the pandemic not as a global healthcare crisis, but just as kind of a marker of time for a moment. And I'll say, that, um, pre-pandemic, the pre-pandemic, the workforce generally went to the workplace or the office because that's where all the stuff was that they needed to do their work. It's people had workstations and computers at a desk, so they had to go there to do their work, or the data was stored in a data center, so they had to go there, or the people that they did work with, that they had to solve problems with or build consensus, they were all there. But today, all of that is actually
Mhm.
here. And so the concept of why do we go to a workplace, I think, has changed. I think there's a new relationship between the worker and the workplace or the office. And I think that that has a huge impact on the potential outcomes or trajectory of a city. Do you see a similar
Oh,
thing?
huge, huge. You know, the web. So COVID is definitely one of the historical turning points. We won't
Sure.
know the full consequences probably for another couple of decades because you need you
Yeah,
need to actually
right.
look back to be able to understand what happened. It's much harder to understand it when you're in the moment. Um,
Sure.
so I think what you described is perfectly understandable, and you've got quite a few communities, quite a lot of inner cities in many parts of the world that continue to be quite empty. A lot of vacant space. Not great if you're in the commercial real estate business. Some communities, though,
Right.
are seeing a bit of a comeback, like San Francisco, for example, starting to get some good occupancy, and companies are moving in, and new companies are emerging. So, um,
Right.
but that won't be like so many things won't be necessarily the trend we see everywhere. But I would take your point
Right.
even further in that
Yeah.
yes, we're asking questions about where we work and what tools we use to work. I think we're now asking what is work,
Yeah,
and the
sure.
very form of like how we deliver it time wise. Um, y- the notion that there are 7 days in the week and of which five you work and there's 2 days that are the weekend, has its foundations in a different time, right? And
Yeah.
that the fact that we still, so many people in the United States and around the world start work, I don't know, 8 a.m. We're going to just say they get to the office and wrap up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. Why? Why? Right? Um,
Right.
and so now you've got questions of what does it mean to work? You know, is it if I do the same amount of work in 3 hours, is that not good enough? Perhaps or should I work 3 days a week or 6 days? Like, why have we been in such a fixed mold for so long? And this is not me just sort of like sitting at the end of a bar, just kind of musing on some interesting ideas. This is what organizations
Yeah,
are
that's right.
thinking about deeply, and in fact, there's kind of a tension between an older leadership and the new employees trying to figure that out. Like the new employee
Yeah.
wants massive flexibility, but's prepared to work hard and smart. The old guard wants people to come to cubicles every day, for 40 hours a week at minimum. Well, it can't both can't exist and have the same level of demand. There's going to be some sort of new form of that emerging, and you start to see, for example, companies saying, "I think 4 days are acceptable now. You can choose the 4 days you work." A lot of companies are saying now of those 4 days, you can choose to have up to three at home or in the office. That seems to be
Yeah.
where a lot of businesses are kind of landing is in the 3 days, at home or in the office mode. Um, and then people are asking what we sold. So was people sort of saying, well, am I actually doing work that's meaningful or well aligned with my interest areas? And that's created in of itself a unique workforce dynamic right now, where you we don't have a match between need and supply, and that's
That's
going to
right.
take some time to actually find itself too. So I love this topic. I'm so glad you bring it up. I absolutely believe that the obviously the world's economics are driven through our cities more so than
That's
countries.
right.
The highest level of GDP production is in an urban context, and the future of work, of the work we do, how we generate that economic activity, in of itself is being redefined. So really, a lot of
That's
moving
right.
pieces. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to share with you something that we think we're
Sure.
seeing, and I wonder if it has context to the world that you're in around smart cities. So I'm talking about now smart workplace, the context of smart workplace, and the argument that we make. Um, so let me define my community. So the community that we're connecting together is truly diverse. It's large, multinational or global logos. And so we don't have a community that shares the same laws or the same cultural values or even the same language, right? It's not limited to a geographical location, which has really been a really interesting challenge. And so the way that we talk about it is, can we create a workplace worth returning to?
Hmm.
Something that rivals what I have working from home, recognizing that at any given time, a third of our workforce is not gonna be there. They're gonna be someplace else. And one of the things we think we've learned on this journey now that we've been on for, almost 2 years is that the worker, wants their idea of what the purpose of the office is to adapt to
Hmm.
them.
Sure.
They don't wanna have to adopt the office or move
Yeah.
towards it. They want the office to adapt to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So is there a similarity in, like, smart cities?
Well, I love where you guys are thinking and how you're thinking and where you're going. I mean, we need
Yeah,
every type of idea, and that might be sort of like that meeting place where the older leadership meets the
right,
younger employee with
right.
different aspirations, and you figure out sort of what's the sweet spot if such thing
That's
exists.
right.
Um, uh, yeah. So, if, of course, you've got the tools have changed, right? And we know for a long
Right.
time now in a highly hyper connected digital world, you just need a laptop or I'm hearing more and more people are just working on their smartphones. I can't do that, by the way. I have
Yeah.
to have a laptop,
Yeah,
but I certainly
yeah,
have several colleagues who say they don't even open their laptop these days. They run their work and their lives from a smartphone. That's pretty remarkable. And that says,
yeah.
well, what does it mean then to be in the office or to be in this smart workplace you're describing? Is that more about what I've often described as sort of like kind of almost corporate serendipity, right? Where you being in the presence of
Sure.
colleagues generates ideas, creates knowledge, creates opportunity. Um, One of the things that came out of this, all of us going home, during COVID, was the loss of community and corporate community.
That's right.
And this was a lot of the conversations I was having. I have to say I have a portfolio of startup companies that I advise. I think it's a 10 to 12 companies, and I meet with them regularly. I meet with the CEOs regularly, and they're all relatively. These are new startups, like either just around a year or a little over a year old, and all of them got rid of their offices. Every one of them, yeah. So
Right.
pre-COVID, they all had a little office. They had somewhere to go. COVID, they all went home and they said, "We're not renewing the lease, or we're getting rid of the lease." So they, and I said, "Well, how's that going?" And so for this, for example, people were hiring. A lot of people were leaving. A lot of people hiring. So these some of these startups with 20 people, 25 people, like 18 of the people were brand new. They hadn't met each other. They'd never actually been together in
That's
person.
right.
Um, so
That's
I
right.
so they said, "Look, we're able to produce work, but we have no community, and people feel no sense of belonging or loyalty, right? So we got to fix that. We can't throw that away. If you throw that away, um, well, there's less meaning, I think, to life, less meaning to work. Work is such a big
Yeah,
part of our lives. Whatever way you spin it, one hopes that you personally create meaning, or the organization creates meaningfulness for you, with your participation. And so, okay, you got a very flexible tool set, cloud-based apps on a smartphone or a laptop, let's say, for a lot of information workers. What the startup started telling me is they're at least going to meet, or they will periodically meet in a physical location. The ones that are very, very spread out. And then the ones that are kind of local, they said, well, we'll have a place that you can check in, and we would like you to be in there a few days a week. And because we want the opportunity to be with you, to have you present, and to work with you. I think the bigger picture, perhaps the bigger picture of your question, sort of the intersection with how we design cities and think about the future of urbanization, I actually think that's in
Yeah.
flux right now. I don't know that we have a full understanding.
Wow.
We had a lot of people who, for example, said, if I don't need to be in an office, because remember, people, particularly in the United States, live in a place. If it's not because they have parents or family or some roots there, they're in a place probably because of their job. They're in a, they live in San Francisco because the job's in San Francisco. If you separate those two things, now you can kind of live anywhere, because you don't have now the the central motivation for where you live is now disconnected outside of natural roots or where you were born. Um, and
Yeah.
so we had a lot of people move. They went from San Francisco. They wanted to pay less tax, for example, or maybe buy a bigger home in a low cost place. And what we're hearing right now, it worked for a few people. A lot of them want to come back. They actually want to come back to the
That's
city. They
right.
want to come back to the office. That maybe didn't work out. Now, again, it's early, and I'm a data guy, so I don't like to, you know, give definitive answers without supporting data. But anecdotally, I can say that this maybe is not the future. Some people ask me, for example, so Jonathan, you've been working on the future of cities for about a decade, and it seems like with COVID, nobody cares about cities. Everybody wants to live anywhere and outside cities. And I said, well, first of all, I don't think the trend is so big that it's redefining cities yet. And I don't know that the
Yes.
people who are leaving are going to stay left. If you move to a rural community somewhere in the middle of the country, could be absolutely beautiful. But if you were kind of living in Austin or Miami or New York or San Francisco for a while, you're going to start to miss that. You may need that, and so we have seen sort of like that presence and community come back to some degree. So I think I think
Yeah. It's brilliantly
as you
said.
and I speak in the middle, sort of late summer of 2023, I think there's a lot of unknowns. But the only known is that there is some significant change in how we organize and how we work together.
So what you said is brilliant, and I love it. The One of the takeaways for me is that the learning cycle has is 3 or 4 times faster than what it used to
Yes.
be. And so the unknowns that we're dealing with right now, um, they're gonna become better known in the next cycle, but that cycle can't we can't let that cycle be 5 years or 8 years. That cycle has
Yeah.
to be 18 months or 2 years, and there's adjustments that are made along the way. I'll share with you that one of the lessons we think we've learned is that there's 3 reasons why workers wanna get back to the
Mhm.
office, and it's really driven around consensus, community, and
Mm.
experiences.
Right.
You and I can share information back and forth on a video call like we're doing today, and that's awesome. But if you and I were going to create something transformational for a city, I'd get on a plane and I'd fly to where you are, and we'd sit down and shove pizza under the door until we work out whatever the issues are, and we'd bring in stakeholders and we'd build
Yeah.
consensus. Right? That consensus building doesn't work as well over
Yeah.
video. Y There's something about proximity that drives
Yeah.
consensus building.
And in fact, this I know has data to support it. Even
Yeah,
pre-COVID, when because we've been talking about telecommuting. Seems like such an old word now.
sure.
Yeah, um, the artifact of the 1980s or 90s, telecommuting.
Yeah,
I think it's just work from home now, isn't WFM? Um,
yeah,
and so the questions were asked, like, if in a world where you have tools like the internet and digitalization, where you can work in groups but over uh, geographically spread areas, um, what are some of the values of being in person? And the data, and this, again, predating COVID, was that if you're going to work on a project, so projects, by the way, as you probably know, they're hard to get right, and the failure rate for a lot of projects
right.
is is higher than most of us would actually like to admit. But
That's
if you know
right.
if you're good, slick team with good experience, you have better chances of a good outcome. But if you compare, teams delivering similar types of projects, the team that started in person and then continued in other modalities are more successful at projects than those that
That's right.
don't form together. That's real data.
That's
That's
right.
real data. Yeah.
One of the things that we've also seen, is that, workers, in particular younger workers, want to consume the office. It's not a place they
Mm.
go to, it's a thing that they
Oh, interesting.
consume because there's an experience there or an expectation that they have of what the office is supposed to be like. And I when I think about the smart city programs that I've been involved with, I think there's a correlation there. Whereas an example, the last smart transportation project I was on, nobody wanted to see the cameras or the sensors or the IoT devices. They just wanted the congestion to go
Yeah.
away. They wanted to consume the road. They didn't care about the tech that made that
Mm.
possible. Are you is that something that
Oh,
resonates with
it's
you?
so much, so much. I'll give you a quick story. Uh,
Yeah.
when I was the head of tech and innovation at the city of Palo Alto, in every respect, myself and the city manager, we wanted to question every traditional way of doing things, as long as it fell within the rules and all that, because there's tons of rules, right?
Sure.
But there's some freedom within that. I was, for example, created the IT area and to look like physically look like a startup. It went from that sort of stuffy kind of what you might imagine a local government looks like to looking like you're walking into a Silicon Valley startup. So physically we changed, and then
Yeah.
we changed the process. Moving faster, taking more risks, using more agile methods of project management, where
Yeah.
waterfall was the only way people had sort of said we're going
Sure.
to deliver government. But one of the things I did was I had an open door policy. So I wanted to hear, and this comes from my innovation background, is I wanted to be able to hear all sorts of ideas from all sorts of people, have a really open door policy, and people knew that. Word got around that if you want an opportunity to get some feedback, just give Jonathan a call at the city of Palo Alto. He'll invite you in. Um, and yeah, one guy tells a story, one startup, and I have great, again, respect for a lot of my colleagues in the government space. But he tells a story. It was a sort of a over a course of a few days, he called various Bay Area cities, and there's about 40 cities here in Silicon Valley. And he went through, I don't know, 10 or 15. He got voicemail, he left messages, he sent emails, not a single response. When he called me, I answered the phone, and then I invited him in on the same day, and he came with his team to my office. He said it never happened before. It was so completely different than any other government experience we'd had. So just shows you, it doesn't take a lot to sort of tweak the system a little bit and sort of be able to.
Wow.
But here, getting back to your question, I would have a lot of startups come into my office and say, Jonathan, we have a world changing idea, whatever. And I'm okay, I'm going to listen. And not every idea is world changing. I think we know that, but some were neat. And I would give, sort of say, nice idea, keep working on it, whatever, maybe we'll experiment together. And actually, because I was there for 7 years, for a few years, I was a little bit too nice. I was like, and I thought to myself, by being too nice, I don't think I'm being that helpful. They feel good when they leave my office, but I don't think I've actually given them the value of the experience of interact.
Yeah, has anything
Yeah,
changed?
exactly. Or
Yeah.
I work in government every single day. Here's the reality, versus what you perceive the experience to be.
Yes.
So I decide, I don't know, like 3, maybe 4 years in, I'm like, I'm going to give them the hard feedback. I'm going to give them the tough feedback. And I started doing that, and the reality is they did respect that more. The startups and the innovators and entrepreneurs who came to visit me started to actually find that very appealing. You got to have some thick skin if you're going to be an entrepreneur anyway. Um, but
That's
but
right.
here's the thing: they would often start with, um, Jonathan, we want to talk to you today about our new IoT-based sensor system that collects data and produces, these reports, or it's an IoT system, collects data. We put the data into a blockchain, we distribute it. And after a while, I was like, stop with the tech. I like, tell me how, start with how you're going to benefit the community. Are you, if
Yeah,
you're
so good.
building as you say, a traffic system, don't tell me that it's the protocols you're using, the languages you built the software in. Tell me, is it going to reduce traffic? Or, we were very much focused on Vision Zero, which was about reducing accidents to zero, in terms of bicycle accidents, car accidents. And that's kind of a California thing. I think many other communities now have bought it.
Right.
And so I said, I want to know that whether your solution delivers on that, and show me the supporting evidence. And then I just started to coach them about, when I get you in front of the city manager or the chief transportation official, I want you to start with that. And I'm going to be interested eventually in the tech, because I'm a curious guy, and I'm like, what did you build this in? Or, how is it architected? But for the other decision makers, let's be real clear about describing it the way you did, which is, does it make the traffic flow better? Does it reduce congestion? Does it reduce accidents? That's the best advice I can give to any company. By the way, pitching to a city or to any organization, frankly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly right. What does it matter to the people that are gonna consume
yeah,
it, right? And that's the real thing. So we've been talking about innovation and technology through the lens of smart
yeah,
cities. I actually wanna talk about innovation specifically, because a lot of the people that are, listening in on the podcast, we're tech leaders and innovators on our own. But you talk often about responsible innovation,
yeah.
and I'd like you to unpack that a little bit for us. What does that mean, and how do you do it?
Yeah, more important than ever before. So this topic is sort of like risen to the surface just over the last few years, and I'm going to tell you this is going to be a priority topic for all leaders and all technology leaders. I just finished
Yeah.
writing a new video series called "Introduction to Technoethics." Technoethics, um, and that's sort of an academic term for the ethics of technology, right? If you hadn't figured it out.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so, in fact, when I titled the video course, it'll be coming out, I think, in the first of the year. I did call it "Introduction to Technoethics," but I realized people, I need to say the ethics of technology, and in brackets then technoethics, so they know what both the plain language version is, plus the actual academic word, which may enter the broader vocabulary eventually. Um, but it was fascinating to write this video series. One of the hardest things I've ever done. I have been teaching it and talking about this for a long time, but that's a different experience than when you are forced to write it down and actually produce a 2-hour video series on it.
Yeah.
And so I had to get into the sort of heart of what's going on. I mean, there's some basics here, right? When it comes to responsible innovation. And by the way, I'm conflating the two things on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, get it.
Right?
Awesome.
How you behave, which is the definition of ethics, right? Is the behavior of doing things right or doing things wrong, is ultimately sort of responsible behavior on the level, right? So when I started to write about this, one of the questions that immediately jumps out is, well, why hasn't this always been important? Or why is it more important today? And I think anyone who, any of your listeners or viewers who, I imagine a lot have a technology background, understand that the role of tech has sort of moved from sort of the periphery to the center, and that every organization
That's
today
right.
is a technology organization. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're running a farm or a funeral home or whatever it is, at the heart of what you do is it's driven by tech. Some organizations, by the way, haven't recognized that yet and are kind of struggling. You have to recognize that you're in the tech business now. I don't know. Again, it's sort of for
So so I'm
please.
gonna step in on this because it's crazy to me how many CIOs I work with that are at logos that you would recognize, who believe that their role is to provide a utility to their workers, like plumbing or
Mm,
HVAC. IT is a
mhm,
utility, and I just fundamentally can't get my head around that, right? So I'm sorry for cutting
mhm.
you off, but I just really agree with what
Well,
you're
there's a
saying.
transition. I mean, you've got to I used to look at this when I worked in a city. A lot of my cohort were near retirement, and so what's the likelihood that they're going to completely think differently about what they do? if you're going to retire in a year or 2 years, probably not. It does require a new generation. It does require somebody maybe mid-career to sort of reinvent themselves. So I think
Sure.
you definitely see that with a lot of CIOs, and um,
Hmm.
and so it's also, the CEO has to recognize and invite the CIO and the CTO into the C-suite, realize that they're part of it. What I was funny, I'll come back to your central question, but
Yeah.
when I started at the city of Palo Alto, it was like 2011, and I left in the end of 2017 or 18, 7 years later, whatever that is, I guess, end of 2018. And at the beginning, the city had a lot of tech, as all communities do, but it wasn't really central, and it didn't work that well when I first joined. I mean, that was one of the a big motivation for me being there. By the time I was leaving, 7 years later, there was not a single meeting or conversation about the future of the city that didn't involve tech, and I was at every single meeting. So even in that 7 years, the mentality of the city and the role of tech in the city had completely, transformed, such that
Mm.
if there wasn't a technology person in the room talking about some part of the city's delivery, whether it was healthcare, education, public works, libraries, public safety, it wasn't happening without a technology person or a technology to support it. Um, yeah, and this is a nice segue back to the original question about, the role of responsible innovation. If technology is having such an enormous role to play, including its implications to the community, whether that's privacy and being
Mm.
the ultimate custodian of data that is often very, very personal, um, or it is about the consequences of the systems that you deploy. Um, Public safety systems that sometimes are a little controversial, whether it's about using the cameras or again data, or other ways to identify individuals, like surveillance technology. All of these things have consequences that go beyond just, how much does it cost and how long will it take us to build. There's an area
Hmm.
now of consideration, a whole deep, wide layer of responsibilities that all organizations have. So we just can't sort of say, if the technology can do it, let's do it. We have to say, can the technology do it? Yeah. Can we afford it? Yes. And then the next question is, should we do it? Should we do it? So responsible innovation is
Mm.
all about
Right.
asking, should we do it, not whether we can, right?
Yes.
And I don't think we ask this question enough. Through my work, both researching my series and then writing it, the outcome is everyone will acknowledge the impact of tech, and how it can how it can at some levels be life and death for sure, but even can be a source of controversy, sensitivity issues. It can be the difference between a good experience and a bad experience when you're interacting with some government service or city service. I think very quickly people recognize this, but then the question is always, how are we acting? How are we behaving as a consequence? And what is the model through which we should behave? Right? Do we have a code of ethics? Um, do we ask the right questions when we're implementing artificial intelligence? Of course, that's the hot one. And that's where we see, you know, questions needing to come up about responsible innovation, uh, because the consequences of some of the stuff we're going to do or are doing with AI are so
Yeah.
consequential, right? So
Yeah.
I
So
would
good.
just kind of conclude by saying responsible innovation or technoethics, the ethics of technology, are not abstract peripheral topics. Shouldn't be sort of on a list of we'll get to it eventually. I'm making the case day in day out now. This is a 21st century leadership competency, and it needs to be up there in the top five. If you're worrying about growth, you're worrying about having the right skills, competition, yeah, and your ethics and your innovation, your responsible innovation needs to be in there too. Because you might get the other stuff right, but if you mess up on responsibilities, game over. Your company will be canceled, right?
Wow. So, Jonathan, I told you earlier that when I learned that you were going to be with us today, I was like excited in anticipation what this conversation would be like. You did not
Thank you.
disappoint. It's been a wonderful time, great conversation. Thank you for giving us your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, no, thank you, Brad. Great questions, and I loved hearing your perspectives too, from both your what you believe personally, but also what you're doing as an organization, a very impactful organization. So it's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I've enjoyed it very much.